Welcome to the Kingston Police Services Board Meeting 2308 being held on Thursday, June 15th at 2023. The Kingston headquarters in the William Hackett Boardroom. First, I'll ask the acting chief if he wants to introduce the Deputy Chief Brian Pete for his presentation.
Certainly, it's my pleasure, members of the board and Chair Stearns, to introduce Acting Deputy Chief Brian Pete, who's going to just be discussing a topic that I think is pretty prominent in the media and prominent in our community and even affecting New York State with all the wildfires going on and just what our role would be in the event of a catastrophe or something along those lines taking place. So with no more ado here, go ahead, Acting Deputy Brian Pete.
Thanks, Chief, and good afternoon, everybody. As the chief said, I'm just going to give a brief overview of how sort of the city and specifically the police would respond to a wildfire situation in our community. To begin with, it's no surprise that particularly this season, it's been very prevalent with the effects of some of these fires on communities, not only ones that are near an active fire, but certainly with wind conditions. Sort of the entire nation has been affected. And certainly the smoke and fire does not respect international borders. So our response, Kingston in particular, is response to a local wildfire, which is an unplanned, uncontrolled, and unpredictable fire in an area of combustible vegetation. So it would fall under the umbrella of the city emergency management plan, which obviously the police play a large role in. The aim of that plan is to establish a plan of action to provide efficient and effective deployment of required services depending on the emergency. So a really broad overview of wildfire response would be that Kingston Fire and Rescue would act as incident command. If warranted, mutual aid would be activated to bring in other police departments if required, if we went beyond our resources. Generally, requests for further resources, specifically to the provincial or federal government, would come through the Community Emergency Management Coordinator. In our case, that's Brandy Timpson. The police would play a supporting role throughout, and in all likelihood, the chief of police or designate would be have a seat in the Emergency Operations Center. So the Emergency Operations Center is something that sort of gets stood up in the case of major emergencies. The main one would be at Kingston Fire Rescue Headquarters. Not too long ago, Kingston Police was designated as a tertiary emergency operations center. Essentially, if an emergency is declared, it would be by His Worship the Mayor, sort of under the auspice of the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. So if an emergency was declared by the Mayor, he would direct the appropriate, necessary, and lawful steps to protect property and obviously the citizens of our community. The emergency management plan would be implemented, and it technically just provides a roadmap for dealing with various specific emergencies, and also creates a linear structure of responsibility generally for the various services in town. For a large fire that was out of control, likely the Municipal Emergency Control Group would be enacted. The members of that are the director of the Emergency Operations Center is the chief administrative officer. There's a deputy director, the community emergency management coordinator, which is Brandy, the chief of police, the chief of fire, and various other city officials are all part of that group. Specifically for the Kingston Police, obviously we have responsibilities that never go away, including protection of life and property, preservation of the peace, prevention of crime, et cetera. And we would play a big role in that respect concerning our normal duties. And I guess it wasn't a wildfire, but if you think back to 2013, we had a very large fire on Princess Street when that apartment building was lit. So you sort of saw the emergency management plan come into play there. Obviously, fire took the lead, did a terrific job battling and defeating that blaze. The police were kind of on the sidelines dealing with evacuations. We manned the Red Cross emergency evacuation site. We helped with evacuations. The weather wasn't terrific. So we engaged other city things like transit, et cetera, to make sure people had somewhere to go. Further responsibilities of the chief of police specifically or designate are literally, and I'm going to go through a few of these because it's important to know that there is a pretty robust plan in place. So sort of our communications center is responsible for activating the emergency alert system, which is the system that lets all the members of the management group know that there's an emergency and they may have to head to the operations center. We obviously provide vehicles, equipment, and personnel to assist. We control crowds. We control access to and from the area of operation or the emergency area itself. We establish staging areas, maintain law and order. If required, we would be the ones reaching out to the OPP, the RCMP, potentially the military, depending on the size of the fire or whatever emergency we're dealing with. We normally will create our own reports. We keep our own scribe notes, just basically, chronology of events as they unfold. We prepare and submit final reports to the board, to the city. So I think it's important to note that whether it's a fire or something else, the City of Kingston is quite prepared. We have a very robust emergency plan, and sort of the framework of that is the roadmap to deal with all of these types of emergencies. I think, on this point of fires, it is a great example of how we responded to the large fire on Princess Street, which really created some international news. It was quite a thing, including the crane operator who was stuck, and we engaged the military for that rescue. I think, barring any questions, I'll sum it up, but with the plan we have in place and the personnel that we have, I think we're in very good shape to deal with a wildfire or any other emergency that comes along. Does anyone have any questions?
Go ahead.
Thank you for this very useful oversight and overview, and I think for reinforcing also for the public the plans that are in place and the exceptional, these things work precisely because people think ahead and they prepare, and that's why we have professionals such as yourselves. So I just have 5 questions. The first is around mutual aid. We discovered during the Ottawa convoy that a lot of the MOUs weren't in place. And so I think we've learned a lot since, and I think there's a more coordinated mechanism now. But maybe you can either, without going into too much specifics, sort of reassure us that we have the liability and sort of the assistance paperwork sort of in place, sort of. I'll just give you the other questions, and then you can sort of figure out, like, if we might want to take them. What role you see in terms of governance for the board? We have 2 members that are also elected councillors, elected to city council. And so there may be situations where, in terms of a brief or perhaps also for collective decision-making in a democracy, where we also want to make sure we have, where we might want to make use of these resources. As you know, some of the larger cities have emergency management groups that have representation from both board and council. The third is on the premise that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. I know we do at least one active shooter exercise, if I understand correctly, with the OPP and with the MPs. To what extent we've actually exercised some of this, and that we have confidence sort of in this. The fourth is resources. What we saw during the Ottawa convoy is a situation where nobody wanted to share resources because they weren't sure what was going to come their way. So that, yes, what is the plan B if we can't actually get resources because everybody else is tied up? And the secondary to that is that we can sustain sort of the strain on resources for a day or 2, but of course, with 4 patrol shifts and a small service, how we sustain the resources, fires, as we saw often go for multiple days. And so if you're policing the city while at the same time having to deal with that emergency, that can impose a considerable strain on the first responders. And the last is what the sort of initial chain of command looks like. I gather there's in principle always a duty inspector on call, if I understand that, and what the thresholds are for sort of just letting the local, the day sort of incident commander take care of it, and at what point sort of the duty inspector sort of would get involved.
Okay, thank you for those. In terms of mutual aid, Christian, so the issues in Ottawa sort of shone us a bright light on the fact that, perhaps there wasn't quite the preparedness required for an event that was completely unexpected. And obviously, the scope of that went beyond anyone's thought processes there. I think since then, certainly in the policing area, there's now a hub model for public order. So you no longer could reach out to, your buddy in Toronto saying, we need mounted unit, we need your public order unit for homecoming, et cetera, we'll pay for it. So now these requests go through a provincial hub, and they sort of manage the deployment of these groups. So those are planned events, obviously. In an unplanned event, certainly if you need a public order, and I don't think it just will stop with public order, you would go to these management groups, which involve multiple municipalities and multiple police chiefs. And I think Ottawa also sort of provided a roadmap or a framework for, the requirement to help each other out, because certainly Ottawa was completely overwhelmed with that, but those were not just Ottawa citizens. Those were people that had come from across the country. Certainly, if having a wildfire in a municipality that's not fully equipped to deal with it, I think they would immediately start getting offered assistance by other communities. If not, the ask would certainly be there. And in terms of MOUs, there's always MOUs being developed. We certainly do have some MOUs with local service providers. And outside of that, you would start leaning sort of on other municipal governments or specifically police chiefs. If it was a police issue, an issue like a wildfire, I think through the emergency control group, they would have their contacts to reach out for mutual aid. The role of the board, in an emergency like this would be, we have the mayor who's on the board. He would also be obviously heavily involved municipally in dealing with setting up of the EOC. If he declared an emergency, it sort of puts him in charge to seek whatever resources he feels are necessary. If those went outside of our capabilities, then certainly there are ways to reach out, and normally that would be through the Community Emergency Management Coordinator, whether that's another municipality to help us out, or the provincial government, or the federal government, or the military. So the role of the board, the mayor is on the board, so you'd be obviously very informed. You're obviously involved in governance over the police service. So I think there would be definitely information sharing, and in terms of decision making, I'm not going to wade into that because I don't know. So I'll leave that one to you folks. Practice runs, yes. So I have been involved in years gone by with sort of running out, like we've done exercises at the airport, a mock plane crash, and just see how all the different services respond to and work together. I certainly feel that you can't do enough preparation, and I'd be happy to be involved, and I'm sure the chief's on the same board as making sure that we're doing enough and varied types of responses to different emergencies. So we do that. The active shooter piece, we do practice that. Our emergency response unit practices it quite often. But as a department, we definitely do very robust training every other year for active shooters. And it's always on the back of our mind because they've become so prevalent. But I think we are quite prepared for that. including having done some exercises where the OPP True Team comes and relieves ours, because to your point, we don't have unlimited resources. So when people get exhausted, but the event is still going, there are things and systems in place for relief to come in, and then it sort of just flip-flops by maybe 12-hour periods where we would come back and take over after being relieved. The resource piece, just to build on that, so we wouldn't probably rely on the platoon that was working to deal with a major emergency, knowing that, of course, the city has to be policed no matter what else is going on. So there's lots of people that work here. There's lots of people willing to come in and help. It obviously would up the cost because it would be overtime and they're not scheduled to be working. But I feel confident we will get a very robust response to any emergency that we had, and would have enough local resources definitely to get things under control and sort of cool down and then start asking or looking for what else we need. And all that runs sort of into the next question of the Plan B. The Plan B is similar to any other municipality. I mean, if you're getting to, we're of a size where I don't think it would be easy to overwhelm us. We have a very good sized police service. We have a very good and professional fire service. Kingston Utilities, we all work very well together. So the Plan B is sort of, as we talk about things and as we prepare, in the back of our mind, we always are thinking about what happens if we run out of resources and this event is still going on. And it would literally just be the Emergency Control Management Group reaching out for assistance. And then government-wise, I'm sure that between communities, there are things in place to help each other out. And the chain of command, yes, we do have, the inspectors are on call 1 week each per month, and they deal with sort of everything that is above what a watch commander would be willing or have the time to deal with, because they're obviously running their shift and taking care of the city. Sometimes it's a liability piece. So the duty officers are very, very well trained. They're also well aware of when to engage a deputy or the chief of police, and sort of that hierarchy. The chief and deputy would be aware of decisions made regardless, and then so it'd be up to the chief to report back to the board. And I think that was all of them. Good, thanks.
Christian, you're good? Okay, that was very informative. Thank you very much, Brian. And is there any other questions from board members? No? Okay, good.
If I could just piggyback,
Yeah.
just on one, and that was great, thanks, Brian.
Please do.
On a day-to-day basis too, I think just to reinforce, I came from a smaller service now here in Kingston. From the newest officer on the road to the most senior duty officer, on a daily basis, these things occur where we activate our incident command, a barricaded person with a knife. And the job these people do is tremendous. And they set up the incident command. They have a scribe. ERU is called in. And this goes on behind the scenes almost on a weekly basis, if not daily, some days. And I would put them on the same caliber as any larger service any day of the week. And it's tremendous to see. And I'm very comfortable knowing the resources we don't have. A lot of the smaller services, you do the same job just with less people. But here it certainly is tremendous to see. So rest assured, you're well taken care of here, and it's very impressive to see.
Thank you. Good to know. Okay, then we're going to move on. Is there a disclosure of a conflict of interest? No? Then I'll ask that for the approval of the agenda. Oh, thank you. All right. First or second are good. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Then if I can have a motion for the adoption of the minutes. Thank you, Gail, Christian, all in favor? And those minutes will be from meeting 2307 held May 18th, 2023. Then as far as communications go, is there any questions for the following communications from the Ministry of the Solicitor General, the Ontario Association of Police Board Services, and Canadian Association of Police Governance be received? Oh, sorry. Okay, so we're going to receive them, first or seconder. Thank you. Now, is there, all in favor? Is there any questions on those? Christian?
There's a couple of grants in there. Will we be availing ourselves of those, or are those not applicable for our purposes?
Yes, we've got some applications. I think first ones needs to be in July. Well, first one's at the end of the month. We're currently working on a plan with the victims and victim services. And the second one, I think, is due for MCERTs, our mobile crisis, by July 4th. So they've been put out to our staff to look into them, and if they're applicable, we'll be applying.
Thanks. And then I would ask if there's any delegations. There's not. Information reports, motions, new business, staffing update.
Certainly, and we have a couple of upcoming retirements, so I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention that Sue Carr is going to be leaving us, as is Trent Thrasher. And as we've discussed, we'll let the board know when we're going to have a farewell for them. So if you're able, you could attend, and we certainly wish them well as they move forward into their next chapter. Both have been here for a long period of time, and they're looking forward to retirement.
Okay, thanks for that. Is there any new business for this portion of the meeting? No? Okay. Then I would ask that we move in camera. Can I have a motion, first or seconder? Very good, Christian. Brian, all in favor? And then I would say we'll resume in 5 minutes. Thank you.